If you're confused about your options around staff reductions during the COVID-19 crisis, stay tuned. Hi, entrepreneurs. I'm Vicky Brown, and you're in the right place if you want to engage your team, boost your business, and grow your leadership muscle. Today, we're going to focus on staff reduction options during an economic downturn. When the U.S. economy came to a halt on a dime, we all looked around and tried to figure out what to do next. Revenue stopped, and a lot of businesses were forced to close up shop overnight. So, of course, we all immediately tried to figure out how can we reduce or halt expenses. And for most of us, our payroll is our largest expense. There are various frameworks available for reducing your staff costs. You can reduce the hours of employees or cut salaries. This is sometimes called a partial furlough. You can fully furlough your employees, or you can do a full layoff. Each framework has its own pros and cons and legal requirements. Reduced hours, sometimes called a partial furlough, can be a reduction in hours per day or a reduction in days per week. You have to take different considerations into account when furloughing non-exempt, meaning eligible for overtime, and exempt employees. Let's start with the non-exempt employees. With partial working hours, unemployment is going to offset the wages that the employee would normally receive. In California, this is done by reducing the benefit by the amount the employee is paid. In some cases, this could possibly result in zero unemployment benefits for the employee, but if after the calculation is made, the employee is eligible for even $1 in unemployment benefits, they'll also be eligible for the new expanded federal unemployment benefit of $600 per week. When you reduce a non-exempt worker's hours, make sure you keep everyone on an organized schedule. It not only helps in measuring productivity, but it allows you to ensure that they're paid for each hour that they work. And beware, California's overtime rules of more than 8 hours in a day and more than 40 hours in a week, well, they still hold true. And non-exempt workers still have to receive the mandated meal and rest periods each day. Now, on to exempt workers. Since exempt workers are not paid by the hour, the only framework available to reduce their payroll load is to reduce their wages. In California, the current minimum wage for exempt workers is $960 per week. And since exempt workers are paid based on a weekly wage, any time worked during the week, even 5 minutes, results in a full week's wage. Another area of focus when you're considering partial furloughs is employee benefits. Generally, anyone working 30 hours or more are considered full-time for benefit purposes. However, you really need to check with your insurance carrier. A lot of them have reduced eligibility standards during this emergency. Additionally, think about the payment of premiums. The reduced wages may not cover the employee portion of the benefit premium. Now, while you're not required to do so, you might consider covering the full cost of coverage during this emergency. A full furlough is when you have employees stop work for a limited period of time, perhaps a week, a month, or a few months. Some of the benefits of a full furlough include the employee remains connected to the company. Their benefits also stay intact. Again, you do have to consider the cost of the premium payments. And when they apply for unemployment, they won't have to look for other work, because the assumption is that you're going to call them back soon. Keep in mind, when you put employees on full furlough, you're required to provide final checks. California's final pay guidelines require that when an employee is released from work, their final check must be provided to them on their last day. And this holds true for furloughed employees as well. The California Division of Labor Standards Enforcement, or the DLSE, has determined that a furlough lasting 10 or more days must be treated as a termination with respect to final wages. So, a final check needs to include all wages due, including commissions, vacation pay, earned bonuses, etc. And you do need to provide the final check at the time that you put the employee on furlough. Now, while sick pay doesn't need to be paid out, it does have to remain in the employee's leave bank. because if they return to work within 12 months, their sick pay has to be reinstated, so you do need to keep a record. Additionally, also be aware that technically, a direct deposit election becomes void upon termination, so the recommendation is that all final pay be provided via hard copy check. Now that's practically impossible during the current emergency, so check with your labor council to see what kind of alternatives might be feasible. Other considerations to keep in mind are the WARN Act, both at the federal and state levels. At the time of this particular episode, April 2020, both the federal and California WARN Act requirements have been partially or completely suspended. But generally speaking, the federal WARN Act applies to employers with 100 or more employees who are laying off 50 employees or 33% of their workforce in a 90-day period. The employer would then be required to provide the employees 60 days notice, among other requirements. Alternately, the California WARN Act applies to employers with 75 or more employees who lay off or terminate 50 or more employees in a 30-day period. Again, the employer is required to provide 60 days notice, among other WARN Act requirements. We suggest that you check with your labor council to make sure that you are aware if your employment actions invoke any kind of WARN Act responsibilities and what those specific responsibilities might be. One final note about furloughed employees. They may not be allowed to perform any work at all. This includes answering emails or phone calls. If they do, they have to be paid for their working time, and that's going to impact their unemployment status as well as your cash flow. If you do decide to lay off or terminate your employees, the following conditions would apply: WARN Act responsibilities, final pay requirements, vacation pay requirements. Also remember to keep the employee's sick pay balance for 1 year in their bank. All benefit coverage will cease, and where it applies, the employee must be offered COBRA coverage. Now keep in mind, California requires all residents be covered by insurance. So to that end, during this emergency, California has extended the Covered California open enrollment period through June 30th of 2020. Terminated employees are also eligible for full unemployment benefits. One additional point to keep in mind: if you decide to do a mix of layoff and furlough, review the demographics to make sure any one protected group isn't suffering an adverse impact. It's easy to forget this step and find out later on that it appears you've inadvertently discriminated against a protected group. If you found this information helpful, please subscribe and share. And remember, your inspired leadership is the secret sauce to having a high-performance team and a wildly successful business you'll love. See you next time on Leader's Journey.